lovelies, and good evening. I am coming down with a cold. It's been a pretty pants day today. There's been a lot of rain, it's been overcast, it's been pouring most of the day. It's been a very, very chilly 18, 19 degrees today, which I know to many people sounds lovely and warm, but in Kigali, when it's raining and it's 18 degrees, I've got my fluffy slippers on, I've got my top on, just sort of trying to stay snugly with the cats. So I can definitely feel like I'm coming down with a bit of a cold. I can feel it in my throat, I can feel it in my fingers, feel it in my toes. So I've got a nice big lake of lemon juice, fresh ginger, tons of honey, and I'm going to slowly sip away on that whilst we do 3 book tags. So I want to, once a month at least, do something literary related, and I've been inspired by watching my friends doing book tags, and there's 3 of them that I'm going to try and get through today. So the first one that I'm going for today is the to read or not to reread book tag, which is all about whether or not you reread books, and I was tagged into that by Andy from Really Random Reads. I shall leave links to everybody I talk about below, and then the second 2 were covered by Margaret over on her channel, Margaret Pinard. She didn't tag me into them, but I really like the look of them. The first one is called The Dragon book tag by a channel called Cobalt Dragon, which I hadn't heard of before. But I really, really like the look of this one. It's all sort of magical and mystical and all sorts of really fun questions surrounding that kind of mythical theme. And the last one, let me just check I get the name right. Yes, the last one's called Spring is in the Air by Uncommon Reader. And I thought that would be quite fun to do because we don't have spring here. When you live on the equator, you live in an eternal equinox. So every day is the same length. So we don't really have spring. Our seasons don't go hot and cold, they go wet and dry. So it's either raining or it isn't, basically. And I thought it would just be an interesting one. There are a few interesting questions in there. So let's dive in. Question 1. Do you reread fiction? Why or why not? Quick answer to that is extremely rarely. I can probably count on one hand, at least 2 hands, the number of books I've ever reread, just because I have like FOMO. There are so many books in the world, and I always feel that time spent rereading one I've already read is time I'm not spending discovering something new. So I very rarely reread books. Same question, do you reread non-fiction? Sometimes, but it's generally to fact check. So I don't usually reread non-fiction from the very beginning to the very end, like cover to cover. Excuse me, I usually just dive in to try and find the facts that I need to pick up for whatever point I'm trying to make at the time. If you reread fiction, what type of fiction are you most likely to choose? Probably something from a long time ago that I kind of have fond memories for. I'm sorry, I've got to sneeze. God, I'm definitely getting ill. Welcome back. So it's usually something from a long time ago that I have a fond memory of. I'm not a romance reader, but there is one romance book called Chloe by Freya North, and I really, really like that book. It's a romance, but it's not sort of girl meets boy, the end. It's girl meets lots of different blokes and has different relationships with them and discovers things through herself. So it's about a lady called Chloe Cadwallader, which is a very Welsh name, and I think her aunt or her grandmother dies and leaves her some money, so she goes off on a tour of the UK, on the tour of Britain, just to kind of discover herself. And it's a really interesting concept, I think, and just a very nicely told book. So that's one that I reread. But funnily enough, I tend not to read the books that I hold up on a pedestal, like the books that I read a long time ago that I just think were absolutely superb. There's one called The Seduction of Silence by Bemla Hunt, and The Memories of Thomas Penman by, I need to check his name, Bruce Robinson, who wrote With Nail and I. quite a famous film. But he wrote this book called The Memories of Thomas Penman, which is a really weird coming of age story. It's one of those books that I feel is completely unique. It's very, very hard to liken it to anything else you've ever read. And I have very strong memories of that in my early 20s as being a really impressive book, and one that I bonded with my partner at the time over. We both thought it was amazing. And I never want to go back and read books like that, because I thought they were so amazing the first time around. And even though I don't remember the details, I'm left with this impression of them being really amazing. And I don't want to spoil that by reading it a second time and going, oh yeah, it wasn't that amazing, was it? I want to remember them as being amazing books. So again, that's another reason maybe I don't reread very much. 4, if you reread non-fiction, what kind of non-fiction are you most likely to choose? Like I said, from cover to cover, not much. I will dip into non-fiction or factual books just to pick up interesting bits I need to remember. There are a couple of things I might revisit. There's a biography called Not My Father's Son by Alan Cumming, which I just thought was superb. It was a hell of a biography, brilliantly written. And so I think good biographies, maybe I will revisit those, but maybe many years down the line. I do like a good gritty biography, but again, there are many good biographies in the world and I need to get through them, so I don't know. Right, 5. If you've read a book which has been translated from another language, would you reread the same book in a new or different translation? Probably not. I have downloaded books in the past and I've realised very quickly that either I don't gel with the narrator or the way it's been written, or as recently happened with a book, I downloaded it and I didn't realise till I downloaded it that it was an abridged translation, so it wasn't the full book, and then I'll just stop and then I would go and find another copy to start on. But if I find that the translation is fine, then I will probably read it once and never again. I recently discovered, what was the book? The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. Was originally written in Portuguese. I didn't realise that till I was looking back through my library. And also, I got halfway through the Tales of Genji, which is apparently the first novel ever written by Murasaki Shikibu. Sorry, I had to get my tongue around that. And I got halfway through it and I stopped. I didn't enjoy the characters or the story. It wasn't for me. And it was nothing to do with the translation. So I wouldn't go and read it in another style. I just didn't want to carry on reading it. So yeah, that's not likely to happen, but there are some exceptions, like, hold on a moment. So there's these 2 books here that are research for me, and they're all about Enheduanna, who was the first ever author, named author in history, and she wrote a lot of poetry and temple hymns. And a lot of her work has been translated, and a lot of it has been translated as well with a sort of a feminist light. And so I wouldn't say that the translation's wrong, but it comes with a certain assumptional bias. And certainly for academic work and for poetry, I will read more than one translation if there is. Just to see whether or not people are translating it as a similar concept. Because especially when it comes to history and historical research, one word can make all the difference. Like years and years and years ago, I went to the Vatican in Rome and took the tour. And when you're inside the Vatican and you look up at the ceiling, a lot of the saints have got little horns on their heads. And you're sort of looking at that going like, why? That looks a bit devilish. And it turns out it was a simple translation mistake, that the word for horn and the word for halo, really similar apparently. And so half of the saints were painted with little horns and the others had big glowing halos. So, one word can make a huge difference to how you interpret something. So in that case, in the case of history and historical works, I will read different translations. But in terms of fiction and just Books, no. Number 6, how many times would you reread the same book? If we're talking fiction, I don't think I've ever read a fictional book more than twice, possibly 3 times. I can't think of a third time read. Probably twice, and then once I've read it cover to cover twice, I will just go back and pick out the parts I like. So I might revisit parts in a book, like a few pages or a chapter in a book that I really like. I'm unlikely to go from beginning to end. Okay, number 7, what's the most recent book you've reread? Having just told you that I never reread non-fiction, I'm currently halfway through rereading this book here, Emergency Sex, True Stories from a War Zone. And the reason that I'm currently reading this is because I might be about to engage in a discussion about it, possibly in August, possibly with a friend. Still hashing that out, not too sure. But if we do go ahead, they're going to read it, and I need to reread it to remind myself what's in it. And this is quite a special book. This is a book that has a very, very big part in my life when I first came to Rwanda. So I won't go into that now, but this is what I'm currently rereading. And, you know, possibly if this discussion goes ahead, you might like to read it before August as well. Very good book. So that's the end of the to read or not to reread book tag. I will leave the questions below for all of these book tags. If you want to join in, please do. Make a video if you have a YouTube channel. And if you don't, you can just answer the questions below in the comments. So cool, moving on. Welcome back. I've had a bit of a costume change. I'm getting that clammy coming down with something feeling where I'm going hot and cold. So you'll probably see me putting my jumper on and off a few times. Right, so the next one is the dragon tag. And I just thought the questions in this were really interesting, unusual. Okay, so the first prompt is called The Hobbit. Smaug, who is the dragon in The Hobbit, loved gold and shiny things. What book or series you enjoyed features gold, shiny items, or has a shiny cover? Right. There are a couple that spring to mind, and I know I shouldn't elongate this, but I'm going to cover 2 really quickly. The first one that came to mind is when I was a child, my dad bought me a book called The Mirror Stone. And The Mirror Stone is a children's book written by a couple of authors, including Michael Palin of Monty Python and Pole to Pole fame. And the book, it's just stunning, and it's got like little holograms inside it. So it's about this boy who fell through a puddle into a mystical world of magic and crazy things, and on every page there was a little hologram, and you could see different images in the puddles and the windows. Beautifully illustrated book. I've never seen anything quite like it since. And then in the adult section, there's a book called Sister of My Heart by Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. And she wrote also the book Mistress of Spices, was probably her most famous one. But the reason that this came to mind is because it's about two girls who are born at the same time, after losing their fathers at the same time, and their fathers die trying to find this ruby in a mine, and I think the mine collapses. And the whole book is just, it's kind of interlaced with these beautiful images, and a lot of it around gold and jewels and sparkly things. So you have the theme of the ruby, and then there's one illustrative paragraph that I'll just quickly read. The storm begins in earnest after the guests have left, when Suda and I are in my room undressing. We switch off the light and open the big window because we both love storms, the dusty electric smell, the dark spreading wings of clouds, the ecstatic drumbeat of rain. We are too wound up to sleep, so we take a long time to fold out our saris and comb out our hair, to wipe the bindis from our foreheads and clean the kajal from our eyes. Suda slips Ashok's ring onto her index finger and turns her hand so the diamond glints suddenly in the lightning, then disappears, then glints again before the next thunderclap. I just love the imagery, and it's so, yeah. So it's all about shiny things. Prompt number 2, dancing with dragons. Dragons and cats go together. Do you have cats? And a favourite book or series that features cats? Yeah, I currently have 3 cats. I've had many cats over the years, and I currently have 3. So I have Howl, who is named after Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. And I did have a Sophie until about a year ago, and sadly she passed away. But I've got Howl and I've got Sen. Sen is named after Spirited Away, so there's quite a Ghibli theme going on here. Howl and Sen and little baby Jazz. So Howl and Sen are about 7 or 8 years old, and baby Jazz is about 2, maybe 2.5 now. And they're my little babies, my fur babies, and a book about cats. When I was a child, my dad used to read me a storybook called The Patchwork Cat. And it featured a beautiful tabby on the front. And the cat would always begin by saying, "Good morning, good yawning." And so that became me and my dad, that was our greeting. It's like, "Good morning, good yawning." So that's a lovely book about a cat. Prompt number 3, dragonology. What crafts or hobbies do you enjoy? Do you have books about crafts and hobbies? I would say one of my hobbies is fixing and tuning pianos. It is also semi-professional in that I do it professionally, but there aren't enough pianos here to really make it into a living. So I kind of still refer to it as a hobby. It's something I do on the side for pocket money. So I write. I think that's probably my main hobby. And do you have books about crafts and hobbies? Yeah, when I read that, there was one that sprang to mind, is when I was a child, back in I'd say probably the late 80s, there was a guy on British television called Tony Hart. And he had an art programme called, I think it was called Heartbeat.
Hello and welcome to another Heartbeat, and today the theme is all to do with stone.
Where he'd make crafts with kids, and he walked into this room and he had such a relaxing voice, and the room that he was in looked like every school art room you've ever been into from that time. And at home, in my mum's house, we have lots and lots of shelves of books, and on that was one of his books. I think it was called, I want to say Heart Attack, but that would just sound really bad. But it was Tony Hart's arts and craft book, and I can still see the cover now. And it was really nice because he did a set of books where he taught you how to draw things. I was never very good at sort of the spatial awareness part of it and getting things the right size and proportions. But these books were about making things out of things like egg cartons, and in the UK at the time there was a programme called Blue Peter, and they were always making things out of plastic bottles and sticky back plastic. So it was that kind of thing. It was like, what can you make out of old toilet rolls and bottles and things that you can find in your house? And yeah, I really enjoyed those. Number 4, dragon art. Do you have a favourite artist? Books featuring artists? Yes, and I'm going to go with traditional form of art, so, paintings and drawings. One of my favourite artists is a guy called Ray Caesar, and he's a bit of a provocative artist. Some of his stuff is quite raunchy, but I love his style. I can't remember how I first ever came across him. I think I was just Google imaging one day and I saw this art and I was like, who is this? And I just went and sort of looked at all of his stuff, and he's represented by this gallery. I think in America. And I looked into the prices of his artwork. I was like, yeah, no, I can't afford that. But I just love his stuff. But I treated myself. A few years ago, I bought a collection, a special edition collection book of his artwork that has some special cards in it, and it's a really beautiful book of his art, I think. And I say I think because I've never opened it, because it came wrapped, so it's got cellophane wrap on it, and I've had this dilemma for years now, is I really want to look at his artwork, but it's currently pristine and mint condition, and I don't know what to do. I've had it for years and I've never seen inside it. So I don't know what I'm going to do about that. I didn't expect it to come wrapped. If it hadn't been wrapped, I would have opened it, I would have looked through it, but it came wrapped and now I don't know what to do. So there's that. But just to throw in another one that is less kind of highbrow, I'm going to throw in Brian Froud. Now, he was an artist that you will recognise if you see it. He worked on all of these productions like Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, all of those amazing films. So like Hoggle from Labyrinth, that was very much his style of art, and he released a book called Good Fairies, Bad Fairies, and I love this book. It's just so much fun. He was like really renowned for drawing fairies. He like loved drawing fairies, and when you open the book from this side, they're all good fairies that do lovely magical things and help people and, you know, are just joyful and lovely. And then you flip the book over and go back the other way and they're all bad. They're all sort of mischievous sprites and gnomes and things like that. And it's just delightful. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. So prompt number 5. Are you going to die? Probably. Right. Prompt number 5. How to live with dragons. Do you cover by, and what are your favourite colours? And what book or series did you enjoy that features dragons? This is weird. I feel like every prompt that she's giving is 2 questions. So that feels like a little bit, I don't know, that's a lot of questions, but I'm enjoying them. So, I do cover by. If I see a nice book, I will buy it because I like the cover and see what it's about. I like dark covers, but at the same point, I like covers where the colours match, where the colours are harmonious. So I recently read The Living Mountain. Margaret had recommended it, and the cover is beautiful. When she holds up the cover, it's such pretty colours. So it's more about how well the colours match rather than what the actual colours are. Having said that, hold on one moment. I bought this book here, Mortlock. These are very much my colours, but I didn't buy it for the colour of the cover. I bought it for the colour of the edging. Look at that. It's got a little flash of red and the edging of the book is black. And I looked at that and I thought, I want it. So I got it. Yeah. So I like unusual looking books. And a book about dragons. When my nephew Damien was a tiny, tiny boy, I bought him a book called The Complete Guide to Dragons, I think it was. Let me just check. The Complete Book of Dragons. And it is delightful. It's got this red cover and it's got like a little jewel in the middle of it. And you open it up and it's so tactile. It's a book that you should touch and feel and play with. And it's got these gorgeous illustrations of dragons. It's really, really beautiful. And I've still got that at home on the bookshelf. Yeah, it belongs to him, but I don't think he's picked it up in a few years. But yeah, it's a really nice book. Okay, prompt number 6, star magic. Do you have a favourite constellation and a favourite astronomy book? Astronomy book, not off the top of my head, but my mum's partner Merrick, he loves anything to do with space. My brother actually works on a NASA project, building a giant observatory. I always forget the name of it. I'll leave it here. And I also have a friend who works for NASA, and he's just fascinating as well. Personally, no, I don't have a favourite book about it, although I have bought books for Merrick in the past. I do have a favourite constellation. I love Cassiopeia for the name. I like the name Cassiopeia. And I love the Seven Sisters. The Seven Sisters, you can see them in the UK. And I like them because there are 7 of them. But it's almost impossible to see them all at the same time. It's weird. They're so far away that you kind of have to look past them before you can count them. If you look directly at them, it's sort of a bit of a weird visual illusion, like you can't really see all 7 at the same time. But the one that I love the most is Orion. It's not an original one, but I like Orion because in the UK it's a winter constellation. And many lifetimes ago, I went to Australia and I spent about a year travelling around, and I left at the end of winter, and of course in the southern hemisphere Orion becomes like a summer constellation, so it's like he followed us over and came back with us when we came back to the UK. And even here, when I look up at the sky, I can always see Orion, so it makes me feel like I'm home, because it's the constellation of Orion has got like 3 stars in the middle like a belt. And it's probably the first constellation I ever learnt to recognise, and I just feel like it follows through the sky wherever I am. Prompt 7, Chinese horoscope, a book about astrology or astronomy, and a book or series that features the movement of the stars and planets. So the book that features the stars and planets is also going to be my astrology book, which is a book called True as the Stars Above by Neil Spencer. And it took me a long time to remember the title of this book. I kept thinking it was called As Above, So Below, so I kept going down this rabbit hole searching for it and couldn't find it. It's called True as the Stars Above. And I find it very interesting. Growing up, I was totally into tarot cards, completely into astrology and birth signs and, you know, all of that. And what I really like about this book, I should just read what it touts itself as. So, True as the Stars Above is an irreverent, intelligent defence of astrology and an examination of the extraordinary role it has played in the past and still plays today. And what I love about this book is it doesn't matter if you believe in astrology or not. It looks at the history of how it's affected us as a species and the decisions we've made. Like, I think it goes into Margaret Thatcher. After the bombing, the Brighton bombing, she consulted an astrologer. I think it goes into all of these world leaders through history who have, you know, skeptically or not so skeptically consulted astrologers, and also goes into some of the history of how the star signs came into being, you know, and how they got their shape and their mythology and things like that. And so even if you don't believe in astrology, I think it's a really interesting look at how something most of us don't believe in has shaped history all the same. And I always find that very interesting. You know, it doesn't matter if you believe in it, you don't. It had a huge role to play in the decisions made on global scale. And I always find things like that quite interesting. Okay, so that's the end of the dragon tag, and I really enjoyed that. It says to tag in some other people. I'm really bad at this. I don't know a lot of booktubers, and so I'd rather just leave the questions below, and if you want to do it, please do. I know that Margaret's already done it, and the only other 2 people I really know are Heather and Andy and Katja at Page Turners. I don't know if you're watching, you want to give it a go, do. Talking about books is making me feel so much better. I needed this. I needed a little bit of a literary time out. So on to the very last tag. Spring is in the Air by Uncommon Reader. And like I said, we don't have spring. Every day here is an equinox. It's sort of sun up at 6 a.m, sundown at 6 p.m, 365 days of the year. So it's going to be interesting to see if I can answer these. Right, number 1. Spring Chickens. Name a book that makes you feel warm and fuzzy. I don't read to feel warm and fuzzy. I like books that are kind of challenging. I like horror. So I don't generally open a book hoping it's going to make me feel warm and fuzzy. But I guess if I had to pick something, I guess anything in the Puddle Lane series, because Puddle Lane was a really popular series of books, children's stories, when I was very little, so in the 80s, early 90s. And they were beautiful little illustrations. And on one page, there was text that the adult could read. And on the other side, underneath the big illustration, was just one sentence in big text. And the idea was that your mum or your dad would read the story to you. And then before you get to turn the page, you had to read one sentence. And it was really good at kind of encouraging kids to read out loud and to start reading. And it was easy as well, because the sentence was usually repeating something you'd already heard. So you could put the sounds and the words together. And that makes me feel warm and fuzzy, because my dad spent hours reading these stories to me. These were my bedtime stories, and he really put so much effort into teaching me to read. And so that gives me good feelings of snuggled up with my dad learning to read when I was a kid. Number 2, April Showers, a book that is set near, in, or on water, or that has the word water in the title. The first book that came to mind is a book called Ingo. It's young adult, and that's not a genre I read a lot of, but I do occasionally dip into. And this is from the Blue collection. So years and years ago, I was visiting a friend in Scotland, and we were in Stirling, and there's an amazing bookshop in Stirling, and I went and bought loads of poetry books there. Really beautiful place to buy books. And then there was also a charity shop, and I went into the charity shop and I left with a haul of books. And it wasn't until I got home that I realised that all the books that I had bought, apart from I think one, were blue. The covers were blue. And, it's not like I have something special about the colour blue. I didn't go in there looking for books that were blue. It just so happened that all the books I bought were blue. And one of them, Ingo, had a beautiful mermaid on the front. And it was a story about mermaids. And it was set in Cornwall, which is a place that I love very much. And it reminded me very much of Diane Wynne Jones. So Diane Wynne Jones, she wrote Howl's Moving Castle. She wrote, what were those stories called? About Cat and the wizard in the top hat. Oh, let me look. That was it, the Christomancy series about the wizard in the top hat and the smoking jackets. They weren't my favourite, but the Pinho Egg, which my friend Harry introduced me to. So she wrote really good children's stories, Diana Wynne Jones did, that had a nice heathen bent to it. It wasn't as moralistic. A lot of the characters, even though they were heroes and heroines, they were flawed. Like, Hal he's a depressive, lecherous layabout, and Sophie gets quite irritable. So each of her characters have flaws, and that's what I saw in Ingo, is even though the characters were working towards the general greater good, they're also quite flawed and quite realistic, and I like that in stories, and especially in young adult fiction, because I think, there's a lot of pressure on young people sometimes to seek perfectionism and to be perfect, and we aren't, we're human. And so I think to have characters that are human but still good, at their core is, that's better and more relatable to you than having these pristine characters who are always doing the right thing. So having been pagan, I always like a little nod to that, to sort of mythology and folklore in stories. Diana Wynne Jones brought that in buckets. And it was also in Ingo. So I think the first line, it's a little girl being carried home by her dad. I'm too big to be carried, but it's midsummer's night. And Dad says that's the one night when all the rules can be broken. I thought it's nice. Okay, right. 3, spring break. Talk about a time you took a break from reading and why. Just when things overtake me and I find that I don't have time. It's a complicated relationship because for years now, I've almost exclusively listened to audiobooks. And I said this in the last video that I did, and it made me realize that that's not great. That's not great. So what I've been doing recently is reading a physical book before I go to bed. I've actually got 3 of them on the go at the moment. So I've gone from no physical books to lots of physical books. And yeah, I'm actually reading physical books again for the first time in years. I couldn't tell you the last physical book that I actually read. So yeah, it's a really nice feeling. I was worried that it would be difficult for me to get back into tree format, but it's not, and I'm really enjoying it. And there is something about holding a book in your hands and seeing how far through you are. It's really nice. Number 4, Swallow's Homecoming, a book or an author you always go back to for comfort. Chitra Banerjee, Diva Crooney. Absolutely. The reason that I'm going to say that is, so when I first arrived in Rwanda in 2007, there was a VSO, a Voluntary Services Overseas office, just down the road. And when I arrived, I didn't have a television, didn't have a radio, and, there weren't any bookshops. Which for somebody who likes to read, that was a bit of an issue. And so in the VSO office up on sort of the main floor, when you went into the communal office where we had like one computer that volunteers could use, and we had a few resources for schools, and then we had floor to ceiling bookshelves across the whole of one wall. And over the years and years, as each volunteer came from whichever part of the world they were coming from, they brought books with them in their suitcases. And before they left, they just put them on the bookshelf. And over the years, this had built up and built up into this beautiful VSO library. And that kept me sane. And 2 books... The first 2 books I took off that bookshelf, there was Sarah Waters' Tipping the Velvet, because at the time there was a BBC series. I was obsessed with Tipping the Velvet, and I named my car Kitty after Kitty Butler. And the second one was called Mistress of Spices by Diva Crooney. And they eventually turned that into a film, but I didn't get to see that till a long time later, I think, because nobody had a copy. We didn't have streaming services back then. And I hadn't heard of her before, but I love the sound of the book and the cover. And I started to read her, and her writing is poetry. Everything she writes is poetry. I think Sister of My Heart became my favourite, but Mistress of Spices is just unique. The way she writes is beautiful, and she writes in poetry, but not to the point where poetry distracts from what you're reading. Her work is poetic, I should say. She isn't writing in poetry. Her work is poetic. Every word is thought through. but not to the point where it feels laboured or difficult or detracts. It's just beautifully decorative. Yeah, and I really like that. And the reason it feels like home is because going into that office felt like a safe space. You know, you'd be out, you'd be doing crazy stuff. Like, I think I've talked about it before, you'd be in an earthquake over here, or you'd be out in the middle of the countryside over there, or you know, but when you came back to the VSO office and you walked into that room with just all of those books, it was calming. And so I associate her book with that office, and I associate that office with feeling at home. So yeah. 5, Blooms. A book that started slowly but blossomed to be one of your favourite reads. I've got a copy. There we go. The Silk Roads by Pete Frankopan. And the reason that this is, I mean, it was a slow burn because it's factual. It's a very factual book. I bought it, obviously, because of the cover. Obviously, you can't pass a cover like that and not pick it up. It's factual, which made it a slow burn. It's quite thick as well. But it's a story of the history of the Silk Roads. So, you know, these trade routes that went all the way from Europe all the way through into the Orient, and the people and the ideas and the beliefs and the objects that travelled up and down these trade routes. And it is fascinating. And the way he writes it is funny, engaging. So it could have been a very dry history book, and it really wasn't. It's brilliant. It's a really good history book. If you like your history, it's a really good history book. Number 6, Eggs in a Basket, 3 books you want to read this spring. Like I say, we don't have spring, so I'll just give you the 3 books that I've got lined up that are big on my to read. All the Murmuring Bones by A.G. Slater. And the reason I want to read that is just the cover. I mean, it's a great cover. I actually don't know what the book's about, but I love the cover. So hopefully it's good. The second one, I've literally just started it yesterday, is City of Last Chances by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And I'm reading that because I picked up Cage of Souls on a whim. Again, it was a cover purchase. I didn't know anything about Adrian Tchaikovsky and his writing, but I do know that he's actually quite big. So I read Cage of Souls, loved it, thought it was really entertaining. And so, yes, now I've picked up City of Lost Chances and most of the other books he's actually written, but it's probably going to take me a while to get through them all. And the third one is a book called Existentially Challenged by Yahtzee Croshaw. This is a long time in the reading for me. I didn't know it existed, because it is the sequel to the first book of his that I ever read, which was called Differently Morpheus. And Differently Morpheus, damn, it's just silly. I don't know how to explain it. Everything he writes is silly in the most glorious way. Like, he wrote a book called We'll Save the Galaxy for Food, and then he wrote another follow-up called We'll Destroy the Galaxy for Cash. He wrote an entire book about killer strawberry jam taking over the world. It's called Jam. He did a brilliant one called Mogworld, which if you grew up in the early days of computers and you enjoyed text-based sort of mud, moose, mushes, you'll dig that book. It's a good one. So he's just insane, and I love it. So Differently Morpheus is brilliant. There's a sort of a creepy villain called Dr. Diablerie, and it ends on a cliffhanger. The first one ends on a cliffhanger, and I was waiting. I was like, oh, there's got to be another. There's got to be more. And then I completely missed the release of the sequel. So Existentially Challenged. It's about skepticism officers at the Department of Extra-Dimensional Affairs. And I'm really looking forward to reading it. Number 7, Green Pastures, a classic that never gets old. Wuthering Heights. I'm not going to be very original on that one, but Wuthering Heights. I never get bored of that. I grew up with I think the first version I ever saw was the Laurence Olivier film. It wasn't until many, many years later that I actually read the book. And I love the Ralph Fiennes and Juliette Binoche adaptation for film. I love that film. It's one of my go-to comfort films, even though it's very dark. But I liked it because in that version of it, the story doesn't end when Kathy dies. You know, they go right into the revenge that comes after that, you know, and they tell it so well. I thought it got really mixed reviews, but I really liked it. I thought they did an excellent job of adapting a pretty true to the book adaptation and making you feel it. So yeah, I really like that film. And I like the book it's based on, obviously. So, yeah. Number 8. Ooh, this is a controversial one. It's called Pollen. And the prompt is a book or author that you're allergic to, J.K. Rowling. And it's not just because I think that her worldview and the way that she expresses it is quite distasteful, but it goes way back, way back to my first year at university. And I think Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone hadn't really been out very long. It was just starting to get critical acclaim and people were just starting to read it and go, oh, you know, this is interesting. And I'd be in the communal kitchen of our student accommodation cooking. And my friend Lindsay would come in and she just got into Harry Potter and she was trying to convince me to read it. And at one point, I remember I'd made a meal. I sat down at the table and I was eating my meal and she was reading it to me. She said, no, just let me read a chapter. Let me read it. So she read me Harry Potter whilst I was eating. And I did listen. But by the end of my meal and the end of the chapter, I had no desire to continue with it. And, you know, that's not to yuck anybody else's yum. It just wasn't my yum. There was something about it that just didn't appeal to me, which is weird because, you know, folklore and magic and witches and wizards and all of that should have been right up my alley, but something about it just didn't grab me. So yeah, I've never been heavily into her work, and I just think the past few years, I don't think I'd pick up anything and try again in the future. So that's my pollen. Last bit, bonus, is called Equinox, and it says, find 2 books on your shelf that have the exact same number of pages and talk about them briefly. So Equinox is when the day and night are of equal length. So we're looking for 2 books that are the same length. This was quite hard for me because my bookshelf is tiny. I've got maybe 40 books on there tops. And so Margaret, I know, was using Goodreads because Goodreads tells you how many pages books have. And so it's quite easy to check on there which books you've read have the same page length. But I haven't kept my reading list updated for years. So I actually sat down and manually went through my bookshelf. Hey presto, I found something. So I've got actually a couple of pairs here. The first one is one of my research books, Inanna, Lady of Largest Heart, which is a study of 3 quite famous poems written by Enheduanna, so the first named author in history that we know of. And also this collection of stories by African writers, quite dark stories. Now, this one I've read, and this one I haven't yet. I started, but I think it didn't quite pull me in quickly enough. So I moved on. So those 2 are both exactly 125 pages long. And the other one that I found quite interesting. So this is the Brat Travel Guide to Rwanda, the 5th edition. And this is 320 pages long. And so is this, which is a historical look at the Borgias, a biography of the Borgias. I'll talk about this in a minute. And this is 320 if you take out the index. And I think that's fair to do. I don't think that the index counts as pages of the book, really. So that's 320 if you take out the index. And this, of course, is the Bratt Travel Guide to Rwanda, which is extremely useful if you're visiting Rwanda. Get yourself a copy of this. And this is one of my favourite historical biographies. I love the Borgias. So you might have seen the series. If you haven't seen the series, go and watch the series. It's got Jeremy Irons as the Pope, Holiday Granger as Lucretia Borgia? Lucretia? I don't know. As her. It's got a brilliant cast in it. It's really excellent. And this is just a really good overview of them. They were dastardly. Basically, it's about... what was his name? Which one was he? Rodrigo Borgia, who became Pope Alexander VI. And it's all about the extreme corruption within the Vatican and just the most awful, dastardly schemes. And Machiavelli wrote The Prince about Rodriguez's son, Cesare Borgia. Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, great biography, fantastic series. Go and watch it. Okay, that's all of these 3 book tags. And yeah, I'm feeling a lot better than when I started this. It's energized me. Books energize me. And also ginger and honey help. So I'm going to go to bed now. And I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know if you've read any of those. Let me know what the answers to the questions are for you. I'm always on the lookout for good things to read, so drop the answers below. See you in the next one.